You're listening to Good Morning Grant County on WBAT. We're at 6:36, first day of August, and we welcome in on this first day of the work week, Bill Munn, your Grant County historian. Bill, another great story to tell this morning. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Well, today I wanted to do the first of a two-parter. We'll do a Paul Harvey business. I'll start out and then give you the rest of the story next week. But looking back in Marion's history to the first year of the 20th century, Marion was at the height of its gas boom prosperity. The population had soared from a little over 3,000 in 1870 to over 25,000. And the promise of free natural gas had lured glass, paper, and foundry companies to the banks of the Mississinawa. And the city had become a major rail connection linking Fort Wayne and Indianapolis. The elegant courthouse had been built in the 1880s as a testament to the area's newfound wealth. Around this limestone civic temple were arranged department stores, theaters, banks, restaurants, and the offices of the city's professional elite. A municipal trolley system, one of Indiana's first, allowed townspeople to travel tree-lined avenues to work or to Matter Park, an elegant garden along the river. Marion had escaped the problems attendant to rapid economic development, at least until then. Immigrants from Belgium, Italy, and Bohemia had arrived seeking jobs in the glass factories. African Americans came from Alabama, Illinois, and Michigan seeking work in the foundries. Young men from Grant County farms came to town lured by visions of a better life, or at least a more exciting one. This influx of new people, which by the way were largely unattached males, had given rise to another more rough and tumble side to the sleepy Hoosier village. The local papers, as you read them, were full of tales of prostitution, violence, and gambling. In the eyes of many Marion natives, especially those who filled the city's church pews, the problem of the day could be laid squarely on the sale and consumption of alcohol. In a 1901 sermon, If Carrie Nation Came to Marion, delivered at Temple Christian Church in Marion, H. Russell, superintendent of the National Anti-Saloon League, noted that 54 saloons were licensed and doing business in the city. Russell offered his listeners an economic analysis of the problem of drink. He said the average saloon took in over the bar from $30 to $50 a day. Russell estimated that $1,080 was spent collectively in Marion saloons each day. He amazed his listeners by tallying the total spent in a year minus Sundays at $328,040. The three-year total at $1 million, an astounding figure for the day. Now you have to think about the value of the dollar back then. That was an incredible amount of money. Russell opined that the waste of money referred to was only a fraction of the damage done. The suffering, sorrow, shame, and horror are the great damages resulting from the traffic, Russell concluded, and he offered the somewhat facetious proposition that the drinking man should buy whiskey by the barrel and make his wife bartender so that when he drank himself to death, he would have enough money to bury himself and some left over for the widow. Now, we have to change scenes here just a little bit because in that sermon he mentioned the noted anti-drink crusader Carrie Nation. And I think some of your listeners may have a picture in their minds of Carrie Nation and her axe. A true image. Carrie Nation of Medicine Lodge, Kansas, was the inspiration for Russell's sermon. She was a lifelong foe of alcohol and a zealous member of the Women's Christian Temperance Union. In 1900, after some preliminary skirmishes in her hometown, Carrie embarked upon physical attacks on the hated saloon. Umbrella and later axe in hand, Mrs. Nation would pulverize the premises where drink was sold, chasing customers into the street. The solid citizens of Marion, however receptive to Russell's message, must have been apprehensive about the speaker's heroine. Russell was careful to point out that Mrs. Nation would not engage in any smashing here, a rather dubious claim in that the Kansas firebrand had entered into a new and violent phase of saloon wrecking. Reverend Russell told his listeners that in the role of a social student, he had visited Mrs. Nation at the Topeka jail 7 weeks before and found her to be motherly, good-natured, bright, smart, and witty. The speaker told his audience, "The pictures of Mrs. Nation in the secular press are not the true ones, either in zinc etchings or descriptions. They have been warped somewhat." The same week of April 1901 saw a visit of a nation to Marion, although it would not be the axe-wielding Carrie, but her husband David. David Nation had returned to the state in order to visit his brother James, who had remained in the longtime family home in Sycamore, Indiana, near Kokomo. The Kokomo Daily Dispatch reported that Nation was weary of the turmoil he has been compelled to endure, and is credited with saying he would not pass through his experience for $1,000 a day. David's turmoil would not be assuaged by his home visit. And now, next week, the rest of the story.
That sounds good. Appreciate that. Yeah, I've often wondered, how much damage did Carrie Nation do through all her years of axe wielding and umbrella wielding and whatever else?
Well, she did a considerable amount, actually. We'll continue the story next week and talk a little bit more about David's visit to Marion.
Okay, we need to do that. Of course, if she were standing there with an axe in her hand, I'd call her motherly as well.
Yeah. The thing about it is, when you start, doing some numbers here, it does appear that there was a saloon or a bar for about one for every 400 residents of the city. And that does not include, they had the papers discussed what they called blind tigers and blind pigs. These would be unlicensed establishments, or the bars were noted for like closing to the public, like at whatever the closing hour was, midnight, 1 a.m., and then not having people leave. So you could stay in there, and so it was it was a legal establishment, but it was operating illegal hours. And then, of course, there was the full range of those places that just never bothered to get a license. And
I see.
Those were not counted in the figures. So
okay,
more about the nations in Marion next week. I would like to mention to listeners if they haven't had a chance to drop by the public library and look at the exhibit about the Negro baseball leagues. Very interesting, and it's really cool because they've got pictures of the industrial league teams, the black industrial league teams in Marion, the Wrens and others. Marion Malibu had a team, and there were several others,